And welcome to another rant. This week's rant is entitled Digital Wills. And you're going to say, why is this idiot talking about wills? I'm not dead, I have no intention of dying, and what the hell is a digital will in the first place? Well, it is quite important to anybody who creates content to actually have now what they call a digital will. Now, where this came from was this week I was driving back from somewhere to do with work, and on the radio was a show, and they were all talking about what happens to your digital assets on death. Now, this is something I really had never considered. What is a digital asset? Now, in the UK, there is actually no technical legal definition of what a digital asset actually is at the moment. But in IT terms, a digital asset is something that's held in the digital world, videos on live streaming services, photographs on Flickr, music on Spotify. They are all considered your digital assets. And some of those digital assets have value. And this is where this article was kind of coming from, which is, what do you do with these digital assets on death? And this kind of got me thinking, because I know that in my will, and I changed my will a couple of years ago, but my will makes no reference to digital assets. In my head, my assets are, the little bit of cash I've got in the bank, and a few other bits and bobs that I actually have, but they are my assets. I didn't think anything about, is this channel an asset? Is Facebook an asset? Or is the content on Facebook, should I say, an asset? Do I own Bitcoin? Well, I don't own Bitcoin, but is Bitcoin an asset? Well, in the terms of Bitcoin, the answer is yes, it is an asset because it has monetary value to it. It can be exchanged for money. So in the good old days, what used to happen was you would write your will. Your will would say, I want to distribute my assets to Tom, Dick and Fred. And your personal representative, when you died, would do a tally on the balance sheet that says, here are all the assets, here are all the liabilities, this is the balance, and that balance is distributed to Tom, Dick and Fred. Fairly easy and simple thing to understand. Now, my affairs are not particularly complicated, so that from that perspective, they would go to the bank and they would get some, liberate the bank accounts and split them between whoever I've put in my will. But when it comes to digital assets, what is actually an asset to you? And this is where it becomes very, very murky very, very quickly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through some examples of some digital assets, and I'll tell you how I think the treatment of those digital assets will work on your death. And I'm going to start with iTunes, because iTunes is probably the first platform player in this space of being able to purchase and maintain a digital asset. So in the case of iTunes, their basic premise is, on your death, your account dies with you. In terms of any music you've purchased, so in the good old days, you used to go and buy a DVD from, I'm going to show my age now, Woolworths, or you went and bought a CD from Woolworths. Some people may remember who Woolworths were because they went bust about 10 years ago. But you used to go to these places and you would buy, and you would have a physical thing in your hand that you then put into a player and you played whatever it was, right? So it's physical. Books, CDs, DVDs, cassette tapes if you're old enough, vinyl records if you're really old enough. But you would have something physical, and that physical thing could then be willed on to somebody else because it was an asset. Probably wasn't worth an awful lot, but it was an asset and it could be given to somebody else. The thing about iTunes is, if you go and buy films, videos, music, books, etc. on the iTunes platform, you are granted a lifetime license. When you die, the license is revoked, all those purchases are lost. So those of you who've built up quite an extensive iTunes library because they've been buying records from artists for years and years and years, guess what? You can't transfer them anywhere. They are locked into that platform, and when you die, that's it. They're all gone. So all that money you've spent on the iTunes platform is gone. Not a particularly great idea, I don't think. But that's how the platform works. Now, people have sort of turned around and said, well, you can give somebody else your password, they can access all the data, all the stuff. The answer is they can, but in terms of iTunes, that you are then committing fraud, you are then violating the terms of service, and if they found out, they would switch the platform straight off. How will they find out? Well, the classic one with iTunes is most people have some sort of subscription to the iTunes platform. When the subscription bounces because the bank account's been closed, guess what? Things start to get switched off. Going on from iTunes, which is another one a lot of creators will have, is an Apple iCloud account. And iCloud follows a very, very similar regime actually, in terms of when you die, your account dies. All the content you have in your account is then deleted. There is no if, buts or maybes on this. It is a straight deletion. So if you are storing videos you've created, music you've created on the iCloud platform, and I am guilty of this because I use our iCloud a lot for the stuff I do. I have recorded music that I have up on our iCloud, and I also have videos like this that I have on iCloud. And the reason I do that is because it's far easier for me when I'm traveling at the moment to be able to pull that down from iCloud and edit and record more music or whatever it happens to be while I'm moving around. That's the reason why I do it. However, when I get to the point where I have finished something and I'm happy with it, I tend to take it off of iCloud and put it onto a different medium. But that's me, that's how I work. Now, it's possible that some of you out there are storing important stuff in iCloud and think it's all safe and hunky-dory. Well, while you're alive, the answer is it is. However, when you die, it is deleted, and your personal representatives can't get to that content. Now, there is a bit of a grey area with iCloud around family sharing, etc., but nobody really quite understands how that works. And of course, Apple will at some point define the whole concept of what happens to a family account on death. I mean, the whole thing is relatively new if you think about it. But as people get older, as my generation get older, that's going to become sort of a more irrelevant thing. Let's move on to another platform. Right? Let's move on to this platform, the platform you're watching my video on, YouTube. Okay, part of Google. Well, the answer is simply that if the entity associated with the account dies, so if it's a person, if they die, if it's a limited company, if it is wound up, then the account itself dies. So it's very important to start thinking about planning, especially if you're a big YouTube creator and you're generating significant amounts of revenue from this service. It's quite important to think about, whether you should be doing this personally or whether you should have this through some sort of vehicle, because a vehicle has shareholders, and if a shareholder dies, the shares get moved on. If it's an entity, if it's you or I, if you die, there's nowhere for it to. There's no one to own the license, to own the account, because the account has to be owned by some legal entity in the real world. It can't just be a digital account. It doesn't work like that. So again, if you've got a revenue stream that's being generated from this channel format, and you want to pass that on to loved ones should you die, then you need to think about what is the structure you put around the account to make sure that that account can be accessed by those people and that revenue stream continues post-death. Quite important, actually, if you think about it. Quite important. Let's have another look at another classic one, Facebook. Facebook, everybody has a Facebook account. Well, nearly everybody has a Facebook account. I do know actually 2 people who don't have Facebook accounts. Facebook operates slightly different. The reason why I've used Facebook is because they operate this slightly different approach, and they have this concept of memorialization. I've got an incredibly dry throat this morning. So this memorialization concept basically means that when you or I die, the account, as the account owner, your personal representatives, next to kin, whoever it happens to be, can apply to Facebook to have your account memorialized. Memorialization means that you can do certain things, you can post messages, you can change the cover photo, etc. But you can't actually administer the Facebook account. That administration is taken away from you. It's sort of, I suppose, an administration light, I suppose I would call it. But you can't delete content and you can't delete prior messages. I don't think you can change the account security. But strangely enough, you can accept friend requests, so you can accept people trying to befriend a dead person, which I really don't quite get, but that's a different kettle of fish. So from that point of view, the content is sort of held in this sort of limbo status, if you like, but you can't delete it. If you want to delete it, you have to delete the account. Now, I know I mention my friend Bruce quite a lot on the channel because I correspond with him quite a lot and we talk about various bits of music technology, etc. But Bruce has a rather famous mother, or had a rather famous mother, should I say. And in Bruce's instance, he's decided that the memorialization of Facebook doesn't give him enough creative control over what he's trying to do in terms of his mother's memory. So he's actually going to shut the Facebook page down. He might have already done it by now. And he's moving everything across to a dedicated website for his mum, because that gives him the creative control to be able to delete things, change security, and generally the overall how he wants to his mum's legacy to be remembered. So, memorialization might not be the best thing. But the thing about it is, if you are using your Facebook account as some sort of business account or promotion account or something like that, all that content that you've got up there has to be somewhere else for you to be able to move it to a new medium on the death of the account holder. Hopefully, the Facebook account is held not by a person, by another legal entity, like a company, for argument's sake. But it's something that's well worth thinking about when you're doing this. You don't think about it when you first set it all up. I know that I'm in the same boat as you, but now you've got to start thinking about this. How do you, if you are generating significant income, which I'm not, I get a pittance for doing this. I do it for love rather than money. But if you are generating a significant income from this sort of medium, then you need to think about how does that sort of move to your relatives. Otherwise, the income stream will stop. Now, that's not exhaustive. I just literally covered 4 different sort of areas, if you like, but it gives you an idea of the difference that each provider is giving you in terms of what happens on the point of death. Now, for a content creator or a music creator, this can have severe impacts on your family or whoever is going to inherit, because you can be generating a fairly decent income stream from all this sort of stuff if you've got it right, and that could be how you're earning a living. Now, if you were to die and that income stream was cut off, how does that mean your next of kin, especially if you've got a family with children? How does your wife survive if your income stream is literally there 1 minute, gone the next? And that's kind of what got me thinking about the subject for this particular rant. Not about music tech, but about actually the technology of communicating the music and the content to other people around the world. That sort of covered off the sort of the immediate impact of somebody dying, but there is another impact of somebody dying, and dare I say, the tax man. Inland Revenue in the UK, known by different titles throughout the world, but at the other end of the day, they always say nothing is certain as births, deaths, and taxes. The tax man may be interested in this, and the reason I'm saying this is because In the UK, we have a process called probate, which is basically the authorization by the state, a legal authorization by the state to distribute the assets of somebody who has passed on. All right, we call it probate. It's probably known by different names around the world, but that's effectively what we call it. And one of the aspects of probate is making sure that all the death taxes, or death duties as they used to be called, have been paid. So yes, the UK taxman wants his slice of your assets. And I'm going to say this in the context of something different in a minute, because I'm just going to move on and mention Bitcoin, because this was one of the big issues that came up on this radio show. Is Bitcoin an asset? Well, the answer is Bitcoin is definitely an asset. However, if you haven't left the keys to the wallet to your next of kin, guess what? That asset could be worth nothing, but your next of kin may have to pay taxes on it. You can't get to it because you can't crack the wallet because it's encrypted, but it's still an asset. There was a very big debate on this, and I'm not going to get into the whys and wherefores, but if you do own Bitcoin, my advice is make sure that your wallet is set up in such a way that if you were to die, your next of kin can get to the passphrase or passcode or whatever it happens to be. You can tell I don't actually have any Bitcoins because I haven't got a clue what it is called, but I just know you have to have a wallet to do it. Anyway, so IHT, and basically same as when you're distributing assets, you have assets, liabilities, amount of estate, and if that estate value is above a certain level, then the bit above the certain level is taxed by the UK government at 40%. Yes, it's a very hated tax in the UK because you work all your life, you pay your taxes all your life, and then when you die, the government wants its slice of your estate as well. But that's not a subject for this sort of video. But the important thing about that is, in terms of digital assets, you have to determine what is a digital asset, what is an asset of the deceased. Because if you get it wrong, your personal representatives can be liable, A, for being charged with fraud, because they've made fraudulent returns to a court-appointed process, and B, they could also be liable to the tax and the fines if there is tax due. So, actually understanding whether you've got an asset or not is actually quite important from the other side. So again, going back to if you're a creator and you've got an income stream coming off your creation channels or whatever it happens to be, then there is going to be a liability there. And your personal representatives need to understand when that liability transfers from your estate to whoever is taking over that income stream, and at what point do they have to start paying taxes, or you have to start paying taxes, or somebody else has to start paying taxes. So there is a very important point around this, which is establishing whether you've got an asset in the first place, and once you've established whether you have an asset, and if the answer is yes, how do you treat it in death? And I suppose most of us were sitting there going, so I don't care. But actually, you know what? It's something we should care about, because there's nothing worse than the loved ones that you are trying to protect. And that's one of the reasons why you write a will, is to try and protect your loved ones, especially if you've got a family and you've got small children or something. Because I remember writing, when I was with my ex, a letter that was held in a safe of a friend of mine, a very good friend of mine, and that detailed at that point in time where all things were, because the last thing that your loved ones are going to be wanting to do is worrying about money should you die. You need to make sure that they understand where this stuff is and how they get to it. It is a double-edged sword, because obviously you have to start divulging passwords to people, but it's one of those important things, and I chose to do that through the forms of a letter, in that it just stated where everything was and how to get to everything, and how to actually run things down. And unfortunately, that was used against me in court. Trying to do the right thing was used against me in court, but that's a different kettle of fish. But that's all I wanted to say on digital wills. Something that I think some creators, especially when they start to actually make income out of this thing, probably need to think about very, very importantly. The other thing I'm going to just touch on is my penchant for cheeky bids on eBay. So I did a cheeky bid many weeks ago actually now, because these have come from Asia. I think they've come from Japan actually. But I acquired, I can't remember, the R8 a little while back, and it's literally just sitting. It's down the studio, it's sitting on top of something at the moment, waiting to go into a rack, and I just haven't got around to doing it. But I actually found these on the internet the other day, and they are absolutely in pristine condition, and they didn't cost very much. In fact, it actually cost me more in customs duty and shipping to get them here than it actually cost me to buy them. So I got 3 of those, all in extremely good condition, I should say, not position. One's called Mallet, one is Contemporary Percussion, and one is Sound Effects. Roland loves sound effects. I've noticed that in the sound libraries. In all the sound libraries that Roland's always produced, they've always produced a sound effects card. Very interesting. But they arrived. I'm probably not going to do anything with them till after Christmas, I have to be honest, because of my work plans up until Christmas. I'm pretty solidly up against the proverbial wall until Christmas. We have some big submissions going on that I need to oversee, so it should be very interesting going forward. Other than that, that's all this week's rant is going to be about, so I look forward to seeing you guys on the next one. Bye-bye. If you liked the content of the video you've just seen, please give it a thumbs up. It just helps the YouTube algorithm with its selection process. If you want to leave a comment, please feel free to do that as well. Down below somewhere should be the ability to do that. I do try to respond to all the comments that are raised on the channel. Sometimes it takes me a few weeks because of what I'm doing, and I'm getting more and more comments and questions raised on the channel, so it just takes sometimes a little bit of time to do a bit of research. If you want to be notified when I put more rants, mailbags and videos about this sort of legacy tech and even modern tech on the channel, hit the subscribe button, hit that bell icon, and you'll be notified by YouTube when stuff happens. I try to publish at least 2 times a week, sometimes more, sometimes less. Until next time, bye-bye.